Welcome back, I'm Milo, and I'm reviewing all of the stuff that I've seen on Broadway this week because I've been trying to basically see 5 shows a day. And I've obviously been unsuccessful in that, but I've been pretty close to it. So this video is going to be focused on Sweeney Todd. I've already done Aladdin and Shucked and Kimberly Akimbo and a bunch of other stuff in other videos. So if you want to check those out, they're on my channel. Subscribe, by the way, while you're here. But anyway, let's talk Sweeney. So I tried to get a rush ticket for Sweeney. I rocked up at, I don't know, 9:50, maybe it was 10 on the dot, something like that, which is when their box office opened. And in line, I found out 2 things. Number one, I found out that Josh Groban and Annaleigh Ashford had COVID, and only Josh had returned. So I didn't have her playing Mrs. Lovett in the show, but I did have Josh Groban in his role. And number 2, I found out that they don't actually do a rush, which I guess was not what their website had said. Their website said that there was a rush, but there wasn't. The confusion, I guess, comes from the fact that the website's old, maybe. They do sell standing tickets also, but they won't sell you standing tickets while there are still house seats left, or just general seats left in the house, sorry, not the house seats specifically. But that meant that I was trying to get the cheapest ticket I possibly could, and I was like, okay, how much is a standing ticket? And they were like, well, we're not selling them right now because we've got other tickets left, but the standing tickets are $40. $40. In the UK, you pay £10 for a standing ticket. Maybe you pay 15. You don't pay $40. No one's paying 35 quid to stand. Like, Broadway prices are disgusting, to be honest. Still, I asked what else was available. I ended up getting a really good seat, I thought. It was the front of the back half of the front of the mezz. I know that's confusing. Basically, the mezz was split into, I think, 4 sections, and I was in section 2, with 1 being closest to the front. I was in section 2, right at the front of that. So there was a little walkway in front of me, a little ledge, didn't obstruct my view of the stage at all. It was great. And I think I paid $79 for that one. And I went into Sweeney having heard that it was very good, and having heard that people are obsessed with Josh Groban also, obviously, and obsessed with Annaleigh Ashford, but I had to temper those expectations because she wasn't there for me. And it was an experience. I'm not gonna lie, I think part of why I wasn't so keen on the show wasn't anything to do with what happened on stage. I think part of it was just that particular musical, that particular writing from Sondheim just didn't speak to me in the way that I was hoping it was going to. And that's okay, right? Not everything is going to be to everyone's tastes, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend in some holier than thou style that I think Sondheim was wrong. Like, no, that is not what I'm saying. But if you're the sort of person that is really into contemporary musical theatre, if you're the sort of person that is really big on something like a Shucked or a Kimberly Akimbo or whatever, I'm not sure you're going to enjoy this show in the same way that some other folks are going to be able to. Like, if you're a big Les Mis fan, sure, yeah, okay, great. But this show is not going to be for absolutely everyone, I think, in some ways, because it definitely feels like a Sondheim show. And in spite of the modernization, I think, that they've successfully done with it, it still does feel as such. It's got some really great choreography. So the show begins and you've got the entire ensemble singing about the tale of Sweeney Todd, and the way they're all moving is very broken and zombie-like, and so that was really cool. And you've got some really strong vocal performances throughout the entire show. I kind of wish that Josh Groban got a chance to really let rip, because that man can sing, and there wasn't really a massive summit that he got to climb through the show. There were just many small hills that he successfully navigated, if that makes sense. So that was something that I would have loved to see, but it's just not in the part. And I also think that some of the lighting design was really fun. They had just a few moments of very, very extreme high saturation lighting that was very evocative, and they were very tasteful with it, so that was really good too. But the show just didn't do a huge amount for me. Like, it was just one of those things where I was sitting there, and I think part of it is that it takes a long time to get warmed up. So the first maybe 20-30 minutes of the show are really slow compared to the rest of it. And it finds its momentum, and it does have some fantastic songs. And my Mrs. Lovett, who sadly, because I'm in this park recording this, I'm not back at my hotel with my program on my computer, I can't remember her name right now, but I'll put it on screen. She was so good. She was probably the highlight of the show for me. The amount of character that she infused into that role, and just how expressive she was superb. So, like, her sort of solo numbers, or more or less solo numbers, were really brilliant. But again, they were few and far between. There was a bunch of other stuff that happened through the show, and I was kind of left a little bit at some moments going like, okay, I think I'm ready for this one to end. Like, I think I'm ready for this to progress. And I don't feel like this is Sondheim's best work by any means. I feel like a lot of the layering that Sondheim often does so brilliantly and beautifully wasn't present here in the way that I was hoping it was going to be. Like, there are certain aspects of it, like the Joanna, like that, as a riff, as a motif, I should say, very present, very strong, very well performed. I also didn't have Gaten how do you pronounce his name? Gaten Matarazzo. He wasn't in the show for me. I don't know if he had COVID or he was just out, but he wasn't playing his role for my performance. But so you have those motifs and they were there, but they didn't layer in the way that I think they maybe could have done. Like something like Hamilton, for instance. God forbid I make a comparison here between Lynn and Sondheim, but I think Hamilton really well achieves that feeling of layering of those different motifs and of characters switching whose motif they're tapping into and stuff like that. And there are aspects of that here, and I enjoyed those aspects, but it didn't layer in the way that I felt like meant that I reached musical euphoria at any point. And I was waiting for that because by all intents and purposes it should have been able to achieve that, and it just didn't for me. And that's okay. It's a show that wouldn't be particularly to my interests in any other circumstances anyway, so it always had its work cut out for it. Visually, I thought that it was really great. I thought that it was really striking. The audience had a really good time. People were absolutely loving the show, but I just felt like, for me, it could have been a little better. And this brings me on to my main issue with the show, which was massive. This was a enormous problem, and I don't understand how they've gotten away with this. I don't understand if it was just an issue for my performance but it doesn't normally happen, or whether it wasn't a one-off and actually this happens all the time. I'm not sure, right? But it got into the second act, and I got maybe 2 songs into the second act, and I was like, oh no, oh dear, something is malfunctioning or something, because there is a buzzing sound, like a mechanical electrical hum sound that is just incessantly ringing just next to my head. And at first I was like, okay, they've got some like machinery and stuff on stage right now, and certain lights are being used right now, so maybe it's just that piece of equipment, but then it's going to go away. But that ringing persisted for the entire rest of the show. I was sitting there hearing the entire show, and it wasn't my ears, for the record. Like, it wasn't like I suddenly developed tinnitus mid-show. It wasn't like someone had bumped me on the head and my ears were ringing in that regard. It wasn't that thing that I'm sure some of you sometimes get where you can like hear a high-pitched sound for just like a second and then it goes away. It wasn't that. This was just there. And I think my suspicion is that it was actually the AC in the building. It was very warm that day, and I could hear the air conditioning the entirety of the second act, which doesn't often happen. Usually when I've experienced shows that have needed AC, they crank it at the interval, but then they turn it off again for the second act so that it is actually silent during the second act. But it was on in this one, and I think that might have been what the humming was, and it was infuriating. Like, to the point that I kind of want my money back, because I was just sitting there hearing for an hour, over an hour, and I don't understand how. Like, I went to see Shucked, and Shucked's volume was like a little low, and it meant that certain lines from certain characters were a little harder to hear than they really should have been. I went to Hadestown in LA, and there was like peaking on the mic, and it really diminished the experience. And then I go to this, and this I think is the show that I've paid the most for out of everything so far on my trip this time, and more sound problems. Why does this keep happening? Like, how is it that on Broadway, of all places, an issue like that is present? Because I'm confident there would have been other people in the auditorium, or in the theatre, sorry, that would have been hearing it, especially if they were younger. It is the sort of thing that I could imagine if you were slightly older, because people's hearing of really high pitches reduces over time. It's just natural, it happens to everyone. And so maybe if you were 40 or 50, you actually wouldn't be able to hear the noise that I was hearing, and so you would have been able to blissfully enjoy that second act. But for me, it was awful. And I noticed, because I was really paying attention to this, I noticed as soon as I stepped out of the actual main theatre itself onto the staircase to leave, it was gone. So it was only inside during the second act. It might have been there during the first act and I didn't notice it, but I definitely noticed it during the second act and couldn't get rid of it. And when things were loud, it wasn't so bad because there was other stuff going on. But in quiet moments, I was hearing so frustrating. So for me, as much as this is going to go against the grain, the combination of feeling like Sweeney just wasn't really the show for me, per se, with the fact that it, even with me ignoring that personal preference and me looking at it from as objective a lens as I possibly can, the fact that I don't think it's Sondheim's best work and it didn't build in the way that I was hoping it to, in combination with the fact that there was this sound issue for so much of the show, means it's a 2 for me. It's 2 out of 5 stars. I'm really sorry. I would have loved to love it more. I just feel like I wasn't wowed, and I left feeling like that technical issue, whatever was causing it, really diminished my experience, and it was really unfortunate. So I'd love to hear if any of you guys hear the same thing as me when you go see the show. Maybe it was a one-off. Maybe it was that they were using backup AC that day or something. I don't know, because it was so warm. Who knows, right? It's very humid in New York right now. But on the whole, I wish I'd enjoyed it more, and I just didn't. But I'm willing to give it a second chance. I'm going to probably contact the show if I can. I'm going to try and find like a support email or something and just ask if this is something that other people have already flagged or what. And if they say, oh yeah, we know that was an issue that day and like we've fixed it now, then I will probably try and go back, even though I recognize I didn't like it so much, just to give it another chance, because I'm not set on disliking it by any means. And I think I would probably like it a lot more without that infernal ringing noise playing for the entirety of the second act. So we'll see how that goes. I'll keep you updated. For now though, I hope you don't have the same problem, and I hope you have enjoyed and felt like this video was fair. I don't want to be unfair here, and maybe you'll even be tempted to subscribe for more theatre reviews like this.